Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhattacharya Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhattacharya Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Vishnupada Paramahansa Padurikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Padurikacharya Ashtottara Sri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to the assembled devotees All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. I think we're on text 38, Marcy. Right? Okay. Page 291 in your books. I'm sorry, just lift up the sheet there and put it under the book, because we don't put holy words on the ground. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this second day of October 2019 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. We are in chapter 6 entitled Dhyana Yoga, the Yoga of Meditation. Text 38 on page 291. 291. Okay. Kachinno bhaya vimbrashtas Chinnabhram ivanashyati Apratishto mahabaho Vimudho brahmanakpati Kachinno bhaya vimbrashtas Chinnabhram ivanashyati Apratishto mahabaho Vimudho brahmanakpati Kachinno bhaya vimbrashtas Chinnabhram ivanashyati Apratishto mahabaho Vimudho brahmanakpati. Kachinno bhaya vimbrashtash. Chinnabhram ivanashyati. Apatishto mahabaho. Vimudho brahmanakpati. Anyone else? Okay, I'll read. Kachit, whether, na, not, ubaya, both, vibhrashtaha, deviated from, chinna, torn, abhram, cloud, eva, like nashyati, perishes, apatishtaha, without any position, mahabaho, I'm almighty on Krishna, vimudha, bewildered, brahmanaha, of transcendence, pati, on the path. Translation. This is Arjuna speaking to Krishna. Almighty on Krishna, does not such a man who is bewildered from the path of transcendence fall away from both spiritual and material success and perish like a riven cloud with no position in any sphere? Purport. There are two ways to progress. Those who are materialists have no interest in transcendence. Therefore, they are more interested in material advancement by economic development, or in promotion to the higher planets by appropriate work. When one takes to the path of transcendence, one has to cease all material activities and sacrifice all forms of so-called material happiness. If the aspiring transcendentalist fails, then he apparently loses both ways. In other words, he can enjoy neither material happiness nor spiritual success. He has no position. He is like a riven cloud. A cloud in the sky sometimes deviates from a small cloud and joins a big one. But if it cannot join a big one, then it is blown away by the wind and becomes a non-entity in the vast sky. The Brahmanapati is the path of transcendental realization through knowing oneself to be spiritual in essence, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, who is manifested as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Lord Sri Krishna is the fullest manifestation of the Supreme Absolute Truth, and therefore one who is surrendered to the Supreme Person is a successful transcendentalist. To reach this goal of life through Brahman and Paramatma realization takes many, many births, bahunam janmanamante. Therefore, the supermost path of transcendental realization is Bhakti Yoga, or Krishna consciousness, the direct method. Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chukshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, are you familiar with our books and things? Not so much. Yeah, well, let me give a little summary of where we're at, because I think I was just trying to read this verse in purport from the position of someone who doesn't know much at all, and it's pretty confusing. So let's see if I can bring you up to speed. Isn't that going to be easy? So first of all, what is this Bhagavad Gita? First of all, Bhagavad Gita means song, and Bhagavan in Sanskrit, these are Sanskrit words, means God. So this whole book is said to be the song of God, the actual words of Krishna, who is what we call the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On a battlefield, you would think that this is like, have you ever heard of the Upanishads or Vedic writings in general? Okay. So in India, there's a vast tradition of wisdom writings concerning the soul, transmigration of the soul, who is God, who are we. It's a land where really there's a lot of that, and it's some of it is contained in what we call the Vedas, and part of the Vedas are called the Upanishads, which deal with these questions of the absolute questions of who are we and so forth. And the Bhagavad Gita is said to be the essence of all the Upanishads. Another name of this Bhagavad Gita is the Gita Upanishad, or the Upanishad known as the Bhagavad Gita. And it kind of condenses or summarizes. It's only 700 verses long, but here it's expanded because of all the explanations and things. But it's very concise compared to many other books. And so what Krishna's basic lesson here, it begins, first of all, it takes place on the battlefield, which is like the last place you expect a spiritual discourse to take place. But there's a reason for that. And that is that Arjuna, who's the kind of protagonist, he's the student. And he's learning from Krishna, this essence of spiritual instruction. And Arjuna is faced with a big dilemma, because he's a great warrior, and there's a battle about to take place, really a war, which is going to decide the fate of India, say. Let's call it India. And whether it's going to be ruled by virtuous rulers or by what we call demonic rulers. So this is good versus evil. Now, naturally, Krishna, God, is on the side of good. He's Arjuna's ally, and he's taken the role, believe it or not, as a chariot driver, which is a pretty humble role. And he's leading Arjuna into battle, and Arjuna says, well, I want to see who's on the other side, just before the battle starts. And it's, of course, there's no modern weapons on there, but there's a lot of arrows, there's elephants, there's a lot of swords and things like it. It's that kind of, it took 5,000 years ago. So they go between the no man's land, the area between the armies. They're facing off, kind of ready for battle. You can imagine. And Arjuna sees on the other side his friends. He sees his relatives, blood relatives, marriage relatives. He sees his teacher, one who taught him everything he knows about fighting, the martial arts. And so suddenly he's caught in a crisis. He doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to kill his friends and relatives in order to enjoy the kingdom. And so he's paralyzed, because he knows that Krishna wants him to for virtue's sake, but it's so painful for him to, not that he's afraid of dying, but he's afraid of of winning and killing all his relatives. So he's kind of paralyzed there. And he drops his bow, sits down in the chariot, and says, Krishna, I can't fight. I can't do this. So there's kind of a big crisis here. Everybody's ready. The battle is ready. Krishna is ready to see it through. So Krishna begins speaking to him. He takes the role, because he's Krishna's friend, but he takes the role of a disciple. And in India, there's this traditional role of the guru and disciple, in which the guru is the repository of knowledge that's received from God or from the higher a line of preceptors or going back to divine origins. Now, Krishna himself is God, so he's the first guru. He's the most authoritative spiritual master there could be. So Arjuna takes advantage of that, and instead of arguing with him as a friend to friend, he says, okay, now please instruct me of what I should do. I need to hear from you. And that's the essence of the Bhagavad Gita. It begins in beginning of chapter 2, near the beginning. And Krishna basically begins teaching the ABCs of spiritual life. And the first lesson is really something that is revolutionary for us, because most people in Western world, materialistic world, we don't even understand this. And that is that we are actually spirit, not matter. That we inhabit a material body. Actually, two material bodies. One is the one we see in the mirror, called the regular gross body. But the other is the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, the sense of self. And this is very important to keep those two understanding. Now, everyone knows, yeah, I have a mind, but no one can see it. I can't see your mind, Intelligence, the discriminating factor. But this is part of the science of, the Eastern science of Sankhya, or analysis of what's going on. And so Krishna describes, first of all, look, the body is temporary, obviously. It took birth one time and it grows and then eventually disappears. But you don't die. Its soul never dies. And of course, this introduces the idea of transmigration of the soul. Now, if we don't die, that means we lived before too. We didn't come into being when we were born. That's the very important point. We are as eternal as Krishna is. But we identify with whatever body we happen to be inhabiting. And what's really amazing is that as a soul, which is considered an atomic particle of consciousness, we have all of these other, like the cats and the dogs and the birds and the beasts and the insects, they also have souls. but their consciousness is much more rudimentary. They can't understand this science. They just live out their lives, you know. And then they go up until they come to the human form. The human form of life is special because in the higher intelligence, we can practice yoga and break out of the bondage of birth and death. This is like a central theme in Eastern thought, not just you know, what we call Vedic thought, but even Buddhist idea to end this bondage of samsara and come to satori or nirvana and don't take birth again, because this is a very painful process to take birth and then grow, and then all of the things that can happen, you know, in life to cause misery, you know, there's some happiness in it, and then to die again, then have to take birth again and again and again. This is not our natural state. Our natural state is on the spiritual plane, which is called the Satchitananda state, eternity, full knowledge, and full bliss, without any come down. That's our actual state, but we've forgotten it. So Krishna goes on to describe different kinds of yoga, leading to what we just read, this dhyana yoga, which is the traditional yoga. Everyone has seen the pictures of yogis meditating, you know. So that's what he's describing, the science of quieting the mind, focusing on this Supreme Lord within the heart, and in this way breaking the bonds that we have developed to matter for many, many lifetimes. And so Arjuna, that's where we are. He went through karma yoga, the yoga of action, jnana yoga, the yoga of knowledge, of analyzing who we are. And now he talks about dhyana yoga. But throughout, there is a thread of bhakti yoga, which comes out especially in Srila Prabhupada's explanations or purports. Purports just simply means meaning. So he called his commentary purports here. But Arjuna is now expressing, as he has done several verses before, I don't think I can practice this, Krishna. Because Krishna says, okay, you want to practice dhyana yoga? You go alone to the Himalayas or some forest somewhere, and you sit down on a certain seat, and you hold your back, even describe it, back very straight, stare between the eyebrows, and in this way try to control that mind, practice the pranayama. Have you ever seen that, where you practice breathing, in the yoga studio? I did some of that. And in this way, try to grab that mind and focus it on the Lord in the heart. So Arjuna, who's like, after all, a warrior, very active, he says, I can't do that. How am I going to do that? The mind is as powerful as the wind, to try. I mean, we've all had experience. If something, someone insults you or you go through some traumatic experience, that mind, you can't sleep sometimes, and it takes, it can be very powerful. So Arjuna is saying, I can't do it. So then Krishna said, this is previous verses, you can do it, but it takes practice, it's very hard. So here in these verses, Arjuna is saying, I don't think it's possible. So he's saying, okay, I accept your instruction, but what if I fail? In the previous text, 37. What's the destination of an unsuccessful transcendentalist who beginning takes to the process with faith, but desists due to worldly mindedness and thus doesn't attain perfection? In other words, it seems like, as he says here in the verse we studied, 38, it's like you gave up your material life in order to go for transcendence, but then you failed in transcendence, so now what? I've already given up my material side, I'm lost. I failed in both sides. So what's the point? So Krishna will encourage him. There's one more verse before Krishna speaks again, Bhagavad, that we'll see that you don't lose anything. Because remember, the soul is eternal. So any spiritual assets you gain in this life, you carry to the next life. Unlike material things, whatever you gain in material life, any of your relationships, your honors, your money or wealth or anything, you leave it behind. Can't take it with you. But so this is a very important distinction, and it should inspire us to strive for spiritual success. There's one very nice verse. This is our first book, main book. There's another multi-volume book that has expands on the philosophy, and there's a very nice verse in there by a great soul named Narada Muni, who's teaching Vyasadeva, the author who wrote down these books. And he says, Chakvasva dharmam chadanam bhajang hare bhajan na pakpo tapate tato yadi yatra kava bhadrama buddha mushikim ko varta apto abhajatam swadharmataha. Which
You don't know what it means, right? I mean, I'm just kidding. So what that means is, if someone gives up his worldly activities and he strives for spiritual success, swadharma means your job, basically, and he goes for bhakti, for success in spiritual matters. Hare Krishna. So bhajan and pakvo, but just what Arjuna is saying, but the bhajan, the effort is eclipsed, or as you deviate, you don't complete it. It says, where is there anything inauspicious? Because you take up in the next life. But if someone very nicely follows this swadharma, the worldly duties, where is there any success? Because by the force of time, it's all taken away. The same idea. So, in fact, Prabhupada quotes this verse in the text 40, which we're coming up on. I swear I didn't look at it. So that's basically brings us up to that. And we'll see that the final resolution of this comes at the very end of the chapter, where Krishna encourages Arjuna and says, look, anyone who's always thinking of me all the time in love has already achieved the highest yoga. So since you're my dear friend, you're in good shape already. Don't worry about it. Failure, you're not going to fail. All right, so let's read text 38 and we'll see how it plays out. We did 37, right? We did 38. Okay, let's read 39. Etan me sankshayam Krishna Chaitum arhasya sheshata Tradanya sankshayas yasya Chaita na yupapadyate. This is my doubt, O Krishna, and I ask you to dispel it completely. But for you, no one is to be found who can destroy this doubt. Purport. Krishna is the perfect knower of past, present, and future. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord said that all living entities existed individually in the past, they exist now in the present, and they continue to retain individual identity in the future, even after liberation from the material entanglement. So he has already cleared up the question of the future of the individual living entity. Now Arjuna wants to know of the future of the unsuccessful transcendentalist. No one is equal to or above Krishna, and certainly the so-called great sages and philosophers who are at the mercy of material nature cannot equal him. Therefore, the verdict of Krishna is the final and complete answer to all doubts, because he knows past, present, and future perfectly. But no one knows him. Krishna and Krishna-conscious devotees alone can know what is what. So Arjuna is reiterating his faith that Krishna can resolve this doubt, and he will now encourage Arjuna again in the process, and ultimately he will resolve all the issues at the end of the chapter. So let's go on. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Parthanaiveha Namutra Vinashastasya Vidyate Nahi Kalyana Krit Kaschid Durgatim Tata Gachati. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Son of Pritha, a transcendentalist engaged in auspicious activities does not meet with destruction either in this world or in the spiritual world. One who does good, my friend, is never overcome by evil. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.5.17, Sri Narada Muni instructs Vyasadeva as follows. This is exactly the verse I just chanted. Tukva swadharmam chadanam bhajang hare bhajan apakvo tapatet tato yadi yatra kava bhadrama buddhamusha kim. Ko varta apto abhajatam swadharmataha. If someone gives up all material prospects and takes complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there is no loss or degradation in any way. On the other hand, a non-devotee may fully engage in his occupational duties and yet not gain anything. For material prospects, there are many activities, both scriptural and customary. A transcendentalist is supposed to give up all material activities for the sake of spiritual advancement in life, Krishna consciousness. One may argue that by Krishna consciousness, one may attain the highest perfection if it is completed. But if one does not attain such a perfectional stage, then he loses both materially and spiritually. It is enjoined, that was just exactly what Arjuna was arguing. It is enjoined in the scriptures that one has to suffer the reaction for not executing prescribed duties. Therefore, one who fails to discharge transcendental activities properly becomes subjected to these reactions. The Bhagavatam assures the unsuccessful transcendentalist that there need be no worries. Even though he may be subjected to the reaction for not perfectly executing prescribed duties, he is still not a loser, because auspicious Krishna consciousness is never forgotten, and one so engaged will continue to be so even if he is lowborn in the next life. On the other hand, one who simply follows strictly the prescribed duties need not necessarily attain auspicious results if he's lacking in Krishna consciousness. The purport may be understood as follows. Humanity may be divided into two sections, namely the regulated and the non-regulated. Those who are engaged simply in bestial sense gratifications without knowledge of their next life or spiritual salvation belong to the non-regulated section. And those who follow the principles of prescribed duties in the scriptures are classified amongst the regulated section. The non-regulated section, both civilized and non-civilized, educated and non-educated, strong and weak, are full of animal propensities. Their activities are never auspicious, because while enjoying the animal propensities of eating, sleeping, defending, and mating, they perpetually remain in material existence, which is always miserable. On the other hand, those who are regulated by scriptural injunctions, and who thus rise gradually to Krishna consciousness, certainly progress in life. Those who are following the path of auspiciousness can be divided into three sections, namely, 1. The followers of scriptural rules and regulations who are enjoying material prosperity. 2. Those who are trying to find ultimate liberation from material existence. And 3. Those who are devotees in Krishna consciousness. Those who are following the rules and regulations of these scriptures for material happiness may be further divided into two classes. Those who are fruitive workers and those who desire no fruit for sense gratification. Those who are after fruitive results for sense gratification may be elevated to a higher standard of life, even to the higher planets. But still, because they are not free from material existence, they are not following the truly auspicious path. The only auspicious activities are those which lead one to liberation. Any activity which is not aimed at ultimate self-realization or liberation from the material bodily concept of life is not at all auspicious. Activity in Krishna consciousness is the only auspicious activity, and anyone who voluntarily accepts all bodily discomforts for the sake of making progress on the path of Krishna consciousness can be called a perfect transcendentalist under severe austerity. And because the Eightfold Yoga system is directed toward the ultimate realization of Krishna consciousness, such practice is also auspicious, and no one who is trying his best in this matter need fear degradation. So, there's a lot of material there. Simply put, there are these different gradations of activities, both on the material side and on the spiritual side. On the material side, there is, as Prabhupada explains here, there are those who have no idea or are not regulated in any way. They're not following any, the Vedic regulations for sense gratification. Because there's part of the Vedas that deal with that, the Karma Kanda section. That's all this Manusmriti, how to regulate material life, in order to gradually elevate to the spiritual side. But if you're just, leading a life, which is 99% of the people do, based on the urges of the senses and the fantasies of the mind, and there's no higher authority that you're following, then it's a very dangerous life. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, all of these subjects are dealt with. It's okay. This great incarnation actually called Rishabdev, he mentions this. He says, Nunam pramattak kurate vikarma, yadindriya pritiya apranoti, nasadamonye yata atmanoyam asannapi kleshada asadeha. Very instructive verse. He says, those who are simply after satisfaction of the senses, it can be the gross sense gratification or subtle sense gratification, but it has no reference to transcendence to the soul at all, it's just sensual life. He says that certainly that's a kind of madness, pramattak. Why? Nuna means certainly. Pramattak, very mad. Kudate vikarma, because in that mindset, you're sure to perform vikarma. Now, this is brought up in chapter 4, that we really need to know the difference between these three things. Karma, akarma, and vikarma. What these things mean. Now, karma, in this context, Because in general, karma means fruit of activity. Activity that's self-centered and that produces a reaction. It can be a good reaction, quote, or a bad reaction. But there's a result for it. And that result is you have to enjoy or suffer. So, but here in this context, karma means activity, fruit of activity, that's regulated by the Vedas. And there's a whole section of the Vedas that deal with that, karma kanda section. That if you really aspire to go to the heavenly planets and live for long, you can do that, provided you follow these rules and regulations. Then there's vikarma, which is not regulated. It's what we call sinful life, basically. And that's very dangerous. Here, Rishabdev says, it's sure to give you another body for suffering in this world, whether a human body or some lower body. In other words, you're not moving forward. You're basically wasting your human life and going downward. So then he says, because these three verses provide a full lesson here. He gives the origin or the root of our bondage in this world. Padabhavastava bold jato yavan jigyasata atpatattvam yavat kriyastavad idam manomai karmatmakam yena sharira bandha. Sharira bandha means bondage to a material body, which is the situation we're in now. We want to break that, out of that bondage, because the material body weighs us down. You know, sometimes we'll call what is it called? I forget the Sanskrit term, but there's a term that means those who are bearing the burden of a physical material body. You know, these bodies are like ball and chain for us. We're spiritual, we're meant to live in the spiritual world and have complete freedom, but now we're bound by this thing. Anyway, so he says, Parabhavas means defeat. Defeat means if you need a chair, we can get you another chair. You okay? Yeah, we have more chairs. Just run out there, Anya, get her a chair. So Parabhavas, defeat means birth and death in this world. Is born of ignorance. We don't know who we are, we don't know how we should live. We simply are controlled by the senses in the mind, you see. Abodha jato, it's born out of ignorance. So until you inquire into what is the soul, what is God, how can I, practice the spiritual life, you're going to be bound by this, because that's your basic ignorance. You may know so much about some material subjects, if you don't know that essential knowledge, then you're going to get born again and die. Abodha jato yavan na jigyasata atma tattvam. Jigyasa atma tattva means inquisitiveness. Oh, you okay? Inquisitiveness about atma tattva, the truth of the soul. It's similar to that. That's, here, in this city of many millions, I don't know how many million people live here, the greater SanDiego area, 3 million, 2 million, let's figure 2 million, 2.5 million. So there's a relative few. You are here, those are out there in internet land. This is being live streamed. And there's some others, the devotees, throughout but there's a relative handful who are actually jigyasa atma tattvam, who are inquisitive about the truth of the soul and God and relationship. This is the essential questions. We shouldn't give up that inquisitiveness. So so until you become inquisitive about that, then you're sure to be defeated by material energy. So what's the result of that? Yavat kriyas tavad idam manovai. As long as the mind is karmatmakam. Karmatmakam means filled with the material desires for sense gratification, gross and subtle, plans, how you'll enjoy in the future. Mind is filled with these things. That's called the karmatmaka mind, and that brings you to another body, because you're sure and certain as you go through life, ordinary people, as you approach the end, which we do, the body comes to an end, the mind is still working, remembering so many things I enjoyed once, I can't enjoy anymore, right? And then, dreaming, that fears, of course, what will happen. You think it's all going to come to an end. It's not going to come to an end. As I point out, quoting Krishna, everybody dies, nobody dies. Wake up, and open your eyes. You're not that body, you're a pure spirit soul. Chant the holy name and attain life's goal. It's my little ditty. So what's going on there is, the most amazing thing is, I like to point out, as soon as you die, like as a human being, what's the first thing that happens? I'm not dead. What happened? Nobody dies. In other words, we have so many accounts now. You know, this is about 35 years ago, it started to come out, near-death experiences, where people almost die, but they don't, and then they say, what happened? I said, I was floating up near the ceiling of the hospital room, and I watched what you guys were doing. The guy had a heart attack, say, you know. And this doctor came in, and that one came in. In other words, he has an account of it. And then, of course, he didn't die. He was, you know, suddenly sucked back into the body, because the mind is outside, the soul is. And he survived to tell about it. So that's an amazing account, and it happens all the time. I mean, as you go on YouTube and just, you know, hit reincarnation, you'll get millions. And so, but what happens? Now, once you leave the body, the mind takes you to your next, is the template. You've created this state of consciousness by all of you've done this lifetime. Everything you've seen, everything you read and heard, it's all in there. It has its effect. And the things you've done. You can't change it now. The template is made, you know. So you're going here and there, hopefully to another human body, but not absolutely surely. But so that's the nature of what's happening. So what Rishabhdev is saying here, as long as you fail to inquire into these things and practice some kind of yoga, you're going to be bound up by that mind of yours, which is full of these material desires, and take birth after birth. So then he resolves the whole thing in the end. First he summarizes, Evam, thus, manak karma vashang payungte. Karma vashang means impelled by your karma. You're forced to, you know, move along birth and death. Karma vayungte avidyayatman upadiyamane, with ignorance, avidyamane. Remember, that's the root of the whole thing. So then he makes this statement, which is worth remembering. Pritir nayavan mai vasudeve namuchate dehi yogena tavat. Which means that until we develop love for God, we will not be any liberation from the material body. In other words, this bhakti yoga, which is the culmination of the karma, jnana, and dhyana yoga that's been spoken of, and will be spoken of beginning in the next chapter, which we'll have to take up in a few weeks. That bhakti yoga, which the result of which is reinstated in our original condition as loving God and acting on the basis of a loving relation with God. That includes liberation. You don't have to worry about it. You know, you're not taking birth again. If you're truly advanced and you know, perfected in bhakti yoga, it means that you're remembering Krishna in everything. And the next chapter will teach us how to do that, even in this material world. Don't just see the sun, see it as Krishna's energy. It's the heat and light is Krishna's energy. What we're sitting here, it's marble and stuff. Of course, this is the temple, so it reminds us of Krishna in and of itself. But even if you walk on the sidewalk and look at the ocean, this is Krishna's energy. This is vast water. Anything, he says in the 10th chapter, anything magnificent, beautiful, glorious in this world is simply a reflection of a spark of my splendor. When we can live our lives in that way, we see everything with a divine vision. That's a long way toward Krishna consciousness. But the key is to take the process, not the sitting down. We don't have to sit. In bhakti yoga, you know, we are sitting, and sometimes it's difficult to sit. I agree. Even I also get stiff. But mostly we don't sit so much. You know, we're meant to dance. The dancing and the chanting. This is dynamic yoga. It's much easier to become absorbed in the sound of the Lord and seeing His form and the dancing and the music. That's the process of bhakti yoga, suited exactly for this age, and given by God Himself in the form of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is another subject we'll have to get into. But that's the blessing of this age, is that all of us can be yogis. If we're not going to be yogis, we're going to be bogies, which means enjoyers, which ultimately leads to suffering. But yoga leads to the ultimate enjoyment, ananda, which is a different kind of enjoyment. So, what does Krishna answer here? So we finished that one verse. So you never meet with destruction. In other words, the there's no loss or diminution. Whatever we can do in Krishna consciousness is in our eternal bank account. It will assure us, if nothing else, of coming back as human beings. Because they have to have a human body in order to practice bhakti. So we should try to make as much advancement as possible in this lifetime, and know that it's an auspicious path. In our own speed, as our own rate, without burning out, but trying to take up the practices of Krishna consciousness, which are, yes, there's some austerity, there has to be. Because it's just like a disease. If you're really, we have this material disease. So if you have a serious disease, then you go to the doctor and says, yes, don't eat this, and ease off on the all-night parties, like that. Okay, I'll go through that austerity, And at the end you get better, you have your health back. So we don't even know what it's like to be completely healthy, spiritually, But that's why we can read about that in the books. What it means to lead a life of, real virtue, and to be basically happy all the time with some peak experiences that are in the ecstatic, blissful Ananda area. That's just in this lifetime. And then to be confident of going home back to Godhead. And the descriptions are there of the spiritual world. This is the great value, a unique value of the Vedic writings, beginning with Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavad Purana, and others. They give us the details of what a perfect life is in this world, and what awaits us in the spiritual world. And what, the details of what God looks like, what He's doing, how, attractive. This is why He's named Krishna. Krishna means all attractive. He can attract every single soul. And because He's God and unlimited, we can all have our own personal relationships with Him. It's not just one amongst millions and trillions looking up at the inaccessible, powerful Lord. He comes in a human-like form, and we can relate to Him on a very personal level. That's the unique thing about Bhakti Yoga, centered on Krishna. So, I know there's a lot to absorb the first time. But we have so many books, and, hope we didn't scare you off with all that philosophy. Now we're going to read a little other book. And this is a book especially for devotees. And let me put this in the right place. How far did we get? We did 40, right? So 41 is it? Yes, sir. We are separate souls eternally. That is right. Yes, we are. No, we are somebody. We are somebody. Each one of us is a person eternally. It can be, but it isn't. Some people think it's an illusion, but it's actually a fact. Krishna says, I know.
But in fact, we are each nobody.
Well, isn't it good news to learn that you are definitely somebody, that you have your own unique form and qualities and personality, fully formed in your spiritual life?
You just said I'm an extension of Krishna.
No, we can talk.
Krishna controls that consciousness.
No. You are independent. You have your little independence. We're part and parcel of Krishna. And Krishna is ultimately independent, infinitely independent. We are slightly independent. We chose not to serve Him, and so now we're in this situation. We can continue to choose not to serve Him. That's your independence. But you won't be happy. Our happiness is in choosing free will to serve Krishna and love Krishna, and then open up the floodgates, and then we can experience His love for us. We have our full personality. Our personality in this human form is a pale reflection of our real personality. We're so much restricted. Just say your senses are so restricted. Time, you get older, you can hardly even move, get out of bed. Where the soul in its original spiritual body, Siddha Swarup Siddhi, is always energetic and full of happiness and bliss. And you have to read the books. And we're gonna read a little bit from this Upadeshamrita. I want to kind of continue that tradition here. So Upadeshamrita means the essence of all advice, and this is a very small book. It's only 11 verses. Bhagavad Gita is 700, but it takes you from the beginning to the end of bhakti. Really, it's all essential instruction for practitioners. But there's a lot of instruction for everybody. So we're still in text number 3, is it, I think? Yes. So let me read that and then we'll go. Utsaha nishtayat daryat tat karma bavartanat. Sangat tyagat sato vritte should be bhakti prasidyati. Prasidya means advances or becomes successful. So these 6 help us in bhakti. There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service, bhakti yoga. 1, being enthusiastic. 2, endeavoring with confidence. 3, being patient. 4, acting according to regular principles such as hearing and chanting about Krishna. 5, abandoning the association of non-devotees. And 6, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas or advanced devotees, exemplars. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. And so let me go to, because we're Upadesha meeting, have a few minutes. In order to be successful in devotional service, one must give up the association of undesirable people. This includes karmis, gyanis, yogis, and other non-devotees. Once Lord Chaitanya was asked by one of his household devotees about the general principles of Vaishnavism, that's Harekrishnaism, as well as the general routine activities of a Vaishnava. And Lord Chaitanya immediately replied, Asatsanga tyaga e Vaishnava achara. Characteristically, a Vaishnava is one who gives up the association of worldly people or non-devotees. Narottam Das Thakur has therefore recommended Tandere Chadana Sevi Bhakti Sanevas. One has to live in the company of pure devotees and execute the regulative principles laid down by the previous acharyas, which includes the 6 Goswamis, namely Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Gopabhadra Goswami, and Raghunath Bhatta Goswami. If one lives in the association of devotees, there is little chance of associating with non-devotees. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is opening many centers just to invite people to live in the company of devotees and practice the regulative principles of spiritual life. Okay, so we just have a few minutes. So obviously this is not feasible for everybody. I think Mohit is living with us now. How long you will stay, but otherwise no one else here is actually living in the ashram. You're living in the ashram, right? Okay, but right now you live in the ashram. Okay, so so it's not so easy to live in the ashram. I mean, I don't even live in the ashram, but I basically do. I have my own little ashram half a block away, and for 2 years I had the great benediction of living in the temple ashram. And in those days, 73, 74, there was no internet. There was certainly no TV in the ashram. We were basically on an island there. We may have been, in the spiritual world. It was very holistic, and it was great. Because I learned getting up in the morning, the cold shower. I won't tell that story again, and austerities that otherwise alone would be very difficult to do. But after a while, there's so much chanting. There was so much Harinam, out on the street, which is a very powerful form of chanting, witnessing also, that it never felt very much like austerity. It just felt like purification, It's like when you take up some exercise, and at first it's austerity, but then you feel, hey, I'm feeling better about this. Let me really go into it, And that's what it was like. And so I've been fortunate all these years, I've been talking about 46 years, where I basically come in the morning, get up at 3:30, take a shower, very important cleanliness, and then the most auspicious time of the day, which is 4:30, we have this first ceremony. We see the deities and chant Hare Krishna and other prayers, and that routine and in the association of others very quickly kind of purifies you. And so that's what Prabhupada is talking about here, because at this time to be in the Hare Krishna movement basically meant to live in one of these centers. There wasn't much of a congregation. But not to mean that you can't make advancement outside. It's harder, but you have to be willing to really focus your attention and your association. Because it is a great, there's a reason why the one line that Lord Chaitanya gave when he was asked, what's the characteristic of a devotee? Asatsanga tyaga. They give up bad association. This is the main, the cardinal behavior of a real Vaishnava. Because it's obvious, whatever you associate with, whoever you associate with, it rubs off. That's why parents are always careful who you're hanging out with, because they know the child get into bad company, like that. So it's just a scientific fact. And this association of devotees is so potent, especially advanced devotees, because they can instill faith. Because after all, we're dealing with things that are beyond our transcendental subject matter. We can't see God, we can't see all the spirit, But when we encounter someone who has seen, called a tattvadarshi, they can instill faith in us that is real, and that if you practice this way, you also can experience what I'm experiencing. And that's called the parampara. And we're so fortunate that Srila Prabhupada took the trouble of coming, a realized soul, to America, and right in the middle of all of the craziness of the mid-60s with the hippies and the LSD and everything. And he came there and he planted the seeds, and he kept planting until he found some receptive hearts. And this science is now spread all over the world. It's in every land. And it works. If you take up the chanting and you try to follow the instructions as best you can, you'll experience the reality of it. We've come to that point where we're going to now have a nice kirtan. Thank you very much for your